Hey everyone. When I was a young student, I always wanted to speak English well, but I was very shy and I made many mistakes whenever I tried to talk. One day, my teacher looked at me and said, "You can speak English better if you practice every single day." And this advice stayed in my mind because it gave me hope and motivation. Learning English is not something that happens in just one day. It is more like growing a flower because you first put a seed in the soil, then you give it water and sunshine, and after many days of care, the flower finally becomes big and beautiful. In the same way, English becomes easier when you practice every day, little by little, until one day you realize you are speaking more fluently. I remember a student who came to me looking very sad, and she told me, "Teacher, I want to speak English, but I always forget the words when I try to speak." I smiled at her and said, "Do not worry too much, because fluency is not about remembering every single word, but it is about practicing again and again until you feel more comfortable." The student asked me, "But how can I practice if I forget so quickly?" And I answered, "Practice is everywhere. You can talk with your friends in English, you can listen to music in English, you can watch simple stories, and you can even speak to yourself when you are alone." At the beginning, speaking English can feel very slow and difficult, but if you continue to practice every day, you will notice that your words become faster, your sentences become clearer, and your confidence becomes stronger. Fluency is not about speaking very fast. Fluency is about speaking clearly so that other people can understand you, even if you are slow, because being understood is more important than being fast. I once had a student who spoke very quickly, but nobody understood him. So I told him, "Slow down, speak clearly, and use simple words." And when he followed this advice, everyone in class could finally understand him, and he felt much happier. Many students are afraid of making mistakes, but I always tell them that mistakes are our best teachers, because every mistake shows us how to improve and gives us a chance to learn something new. One student in my class never wanted to speak because she was afraid that other students would laugh at her. But one day she decided to try, and even though she made many mistakes, she did not stop, and after some time she came to me and said, "Teacher, I am not afraid anymore." And that was the day she started to become fluent. Another good way to learn English is by reading, because when you read simple books, you see how sentences are made, you meet new words, and if you write those words down and try to use them in your own sentences, they stay in your memory much longer. Listening is also very important, because the more you listen to English songs, stories, or conversations, the more your brain becomes used to the language, and soon you start to speak naturally without even thinking too much. Fluency takes time, and you need to be patient with yourself. But if you enjoy the process and keep going, one day you will look back and see how much you have improved, and you will feel proud of your journey. Remember, practice every day, do not be afraid of mistakes, listen and read as much as you can, and always be patient. Because learning English is like walking on a road step by step until you finally arrive at your destination. I once had a student who loved music very much, and every day she listened to English songs. Even though at first she did not understand all the words, but she continued listening and started to sing along with the music, and slowly she noticed that her English was improving because she was practicing without fear. Another student was very shy and did not want to speak in front of the class, because she thought that other students might laugh if she made a mistake. But I told her that mistakes are not something bad, they are just part of the learning process. And if she never spoke, she would never grow. One day she finally decided to speak, even if her sentences were not perfect. And even though she made many mistakes, she continued talking until the end. And when she finished, she smiled and told me, "Teacher, I feel much better now, and I am not scared anymore." There was also a boy who tried to translate every word from his own language into English before speaking, but this made him very slow and sometimes confused, so I advised him to try to think directly in English, even for small things like counting or describing objects around him. And after some weeks of practice, he was able to speak more naturally without translating in his head. Another student loved to speak with his friends, but he always mixed English with his native language in the same sentence, and this made it difficult for him to focus. So I told him, "Even if you do not know a word in English, try to explain it in English with other words, And by doing this, he learned how to stay in English all the time, and his fluency improved quickly. Reading was also very helpful for many students, because when they read simple books or short stories, they discovered new words and new sentences. And if they wrote down those words and used them in speaking, they could remember them for a long time and use them in real conversations. I remember a girl who came to me with a book and said, "Teacher, I read this story, but I did not understand everything." And I told her that it was okay, because reading is like climbing a mountain. At first it is hard, but if you keep reading a little every day, you will understand more and more. After some time, the same girl came back to me smiling and said, "Now I can understand much more than before," and I could see that her fluency had grown because she had continued reading with patience. Sometimes I also asked my students to record themselves speaking English, because when they listened to their own voices, they could hear their mistakes more clearly and they could improve faster. And I remember one student who did this every single day, and soon she became very fluent and confident. Practicing with friends was another great way to learn, because I had two students who were best friends and they made a promise to each other that they would only speak English when they were together, and at first it was difficult, but with time they became fluent together and they were proud of their progress. Fluency also comes from using English in real life, not only in class. And I remember a student who worked in a small shop and he decided to greet and speak to his customers in English. And although in the beginning it was very hard, after some weeks he started to feel much more confident. Another student was very curious, and every time he heard a new word, he immediately asked me what it meant. And then he tried to use that word many times in the same day, so his vocabulary grew very fast and this helped him speak more fluently. I also had students who set goals for themselves, like one girl who wanted to travel to an English-speaking country, and every day she practiced because she had a clear dream in her mind, and before her trip she had already become fluent enough to speak easily with new people. Fluency is not something that arrives quickly, but when you enjoy the journey, it feels easier. And I remember a student who loved to watch English movies every night, at first with subtitles, but later without them. And while he was enjoying the films, he was also learning to speak better. Another student loved football, and every day he talked about his favorite teams in English. And because he was passionate about the topic, the words came more easily, and he became more fluent, just by talking about what he loved. I always told my students that English is not only about speaking words, but also about body language and confidence. Because when you smile, use your hands, and show interest, people understand you more easily, even if your sentences are simple. Sometimes students asked me, "Teacher, how long will it take before I can speak English fluently?" And I always answered that it depends on how much they practice, because some people become fluent in a few months while others need more time. But the most important thing is to keep going and not stop. One student practiced every day in front of a mirror, speaking to herself as if she was talking to another person. And although she was very shy at the beginning, she became more confident because she could see her face, her smile, and her expressions while speaking, and this made her believe in herself. Another student once asked me what he should do if he forgot a word while speaking, and I told him not to stop and not to be afraid of silence, because he could use another word or explain the meaning in a different way, and this advice helped him stay calm and continue speaking without fear. I also told my students that it is important to rest sometimes, because the brain needs to relax. And I remember one girl who practiced too much and became very tired. So I told her to take a break, sleep well, and come back the next day. And after resting, she was happy again and ready to continue learning. Creativity is another way to grow in English, because when you write small stories, sing songs, or even make short videos in English, you practice the language in a fun way. And I remember a student who loved writing short stories and reading them aloud, and her fluency improved very quickly. Teaching others is also a powerful method, because when you explain new words to your friends, you learn them better yourself. And I had one student who was already good at English, so she helped her classmates, and by teaching them, she also became even more fluent. It is also very helpful to have a daily routine, because when you decide to practice at the same time every day, it becomes a habit. And I remember one boy who spoke English for 30 minutes every morning before school, and because he followed this routine, he made fast progress. Patience is very important too, because many students want to be fluent quickly, but when they do not see progress, they become frustrated. So I always reminded them that learning English is a journey with many small steps, and every step forward is already success. Listening is as important as speaking, because when you listen carefully, you learn how to answer clearly. And I had a student who listened more than he spoke, but when he finally talked, his sentences were clear and meaningful, because he had learned from others. A positive attitude makes learning easier, and I remember a student who always smiled even when she made mistakes, and this positive spirit helped her stay motivated and become fluent without fear. Sometimes students need to leave their comfort zone, and I had one student who was confident in class but shy outside. So I encouraged her to try speaking to people in the street or at the market, and after some weeks, she became brave and spoke to strangers without fear. Learning from fluent speakers is also very useful, because when you watch how they speak, how they use intonation, and how they express ideas, you can copy their style. And one girl in my class improved a lot by imitating her favorite English speaker on television. Fluency is like cooking a meal, because you need many ingredients such as practice, listening, reading, speaking, and patience. And when you mix them all together, you create something beautiful, which is your ability to speak English with confidence. I always told my students to celebrate small victories, because every new word, every correct sentence, and every conversation in English is already progress. And when you celebrate, you feel proud and motivated to continue. Another way to practice is by asking questions, because questions start conversations. And I had a student who always asked his friends about their hobbies, their family, or their favorite food, and this made him fluent very quickly because he was always talking. It is also good to reflect on your progress. And I knew a student who wrote in a small journal every week about what he learned. And when he read it later, he was surprised to see how much he had improved, and this gave him energy to continue. Flexibility is also part of fluency, because sometimes people do not understand you, so you need to change your sentence and say it in another way. And this ability to adapt makes you a stronger speaker. Staying connected with other learners is important too. And I remember a girl who joined an English club where students practiced every week, and because she was part of a group, she felt motivated and learned faster. Small goals are easier to reach than big ones. So I always told my students not to say, I want to be fluent, but instead, I want to learn 5 new words this week. Because when you achieve many small goals, they become big progress. Persistence is the key, because many students want to give up when English feels hard. But I saw that the students who never stopped, even when it was difficult, became the most fluent in the end. It is also useful to review old lessons, because sometimes you forget what you learned before, and when you review, you remember again and become stronger. Curiosity about culture is also part of learning, because English is spoken in many countries in different ways, and students who explored movies, songs, or traditions from other countries always understood more and became more fluent. Body language is another secret, because when you use your hands, your face, and your eyes while speaking, you communicate better, and even if your English is simple, people understand you more easily. Challenging yourself with new topics helps a lot, because one student who loved sports decided to talk about science in English, and at first it was very difficult, but after some time he learned new words and became fluent in many subjects. Asking for feedback is also very helpful, because when a teacher or a friend tells you what you are doing well and what you need to improve, you can grow faster. And I remember a boy who always asked me after class, "Teacher, how was my English today?" And he became fluent quickly because he always improved. Flashcards are also a good method, because you can write new words on small cards and review them every day. And one student who used this method had a very strong vocabulary. Sometimes silence is not bad, because it gives you time to think. And I told my students that it is okay to pause before speaking, because clear ideas are more important than fast answers. Learning phrases instead of just single words also helps, because phrases show you how words work together. And I had a student who focused on phrases, and soon her English sounded more natural. In the end, I always reminded my students that fluency is not only about speaking with ease, but about connecting with the world making friends, and sharing your ideas with others. Because every word you learn and every sentence you say is a bridge to new opportunities. So, keep learning every day, keep practicing without fear, and enjoy the journey. Because one day you will look back and realize how far you have come, and you will be proud that you never gave up. So, my friend, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something new today, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new lesson. And please, write in the comments, "I'm ready to learn English through listening." Your comment shows that you're part of our learning community. And trust me, I read every single one. Let's grow together and make English part of our everyday life.